Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Tour Catch-Up, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
Carlos Alcaraz defends his Madrid crown.
Sabalenka gets revenge on Swiatek.
And Andy Murray wins his first challenger title in over 17 years.
Chris, today is the 8th of May and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ. The Madrid Open has come and gone. Arena Sabalenka and Carlos Alcaraz are your champions. The Italian Open in Rome is just about to get underway on Wednesday, and there is much to discuss at Tennis Weekly HQ. We've got Andy Murray winning a Challenger Tour title, the first time in over 17 years. We're going to be talking about Emma Raducanu as well and her Instagram post about surgery. And we're also going to be chatting a bit more about the Challenger circuit and looking at the role it plays on the tour, because it feels like it is the talk of the town at the moment. So we've got all that to look forward to. Rome as well. We have waited to make sure both the draws are out so we can give our predictions, because they're obviously 100% foolproof. But yeah, Chris, how are you? Kim is not here. She's, as listeners might know, it's Eurovision week this week. So surprise, surprise, she is in Liverpool having a great time. So it's just us at the helm.
Well, yeah, Kim is at Eurovision. She's there before Eurovision's even on. I think she's at a rehearsal.
I'm so confused. For me, Eurovision was just like one night on a Saturday night, but apparently there's like semi-finals, qualifiers of qualifiers. Yeah,
yes,
it's full on.
She's seeing it all. I think it's a bit like, I'll explain it's like a tennis tournament, Joel. You have to enter the qualifying to make it to the main draw.
Well, is there a lucky loser? I hope there's a lucky loser in the main event.
That makes it all the way to the final. It could happen. We've seen it happen this week, haven't we?
Yes, I mean, a lucky loser making it all the way to the final at the Madrid Open. It's certainly been a memorable tournament for some of the good reasons, but it's also been memorable, I feel, for some of the bad reasons, which we're going to get into. But before we do kind of discuss that, we're going to talk about our highlights of the week from last week. And I'm going to go first because my favourite part that I saw was on Judy Murray's Instagram account. And, you know, Andy Murray out playing a challenger in France. Mum Judy obviously wants to be there, looking for a flight, and she finds one. Ryanair, $14.99. I'm having some of that, from Prestwick in Scotland to Marseille. I feel like we can all appreciate a cheap flight.
Yeah, I hope you were. I think with Judy, I looked at the flight to see if it was a real flight, which she was having us on. She's also not paid for by Ryanair. But I do think what is particularly interesting is that she was able to fly and make it there in time for the match, because the flight landed at 12:15. So we do love to give you... It was meant to be. It was meant to be. And then she jetted back that evening. So little trip to see Andy pick up a challenger title. So we love to see that.
And Chris, what was your highlight? Because obviously my head as a Murray fan was in France, but I believe yours was in Spain.
Yes, mine was in Spain, and it was something that I thought was quite jolly at the time, and then it all became a little bit sinister. So when I was watching, I think it was the semi-final match, and then I saw a lot of hoo-ha happen as this giant cake was wheeled out for Carlos Alcaraz's birthday. And I thought, this is lovely, a lovely cake.
All good so
and it's
far?
Yeah, all good. And then I saw on Twitter that it was also Sabalenka's birthday on the 5th of May, but her cake was much smaller. And this then became the Twitter storm to end all Twitter storms, because it became symbolic of something much greater than just cake. It became symbolic of the disparity between the two different tours in terms of pay, in terms of treatment, between the WTA and the ATP, because Sabalenka's cake was a lot smaller. In the defense of the cake, I do think that Carlos's was large enough to feed the entire stadium. It was for everyone who was there. You know, it might be a party bag, take a piece. Whereas Sabalenka didn't have a match that day. But then the Twitter storm happened, and tournament director, which we normally think is one of those wonderful roles where you wander about, you know, you shake a few hands, have a nice time. But he kind of went into this debate and said he was surprised by this reaction after this gesture. Carlos had just won a match to reach the final. 2, he was playing on centre court, and 3, the tournament's played in Spain, even though it's an international event. And then he tweeted a picture of Holger Rune, who got his cake on the 29th, which was even smaller than Sabalenka's. So 3 cakes and 1 disastrous tweet, because I do think it does call into question a couple of things. But also he did tweet that in response to Azarenka, who said it couldn't be more accurate of the treatment. So I think he missed the point that this is much more to do with the fact that it's not even between the tours, rather that they're criticising the cakes that were given, which is obviously a nice gesture. But I mean, where do you stand on Cakegate, Joel?
Yeah, I mean, this feels like it got well out of proportion, but at the same time it's certainly a very visual metaphor, I feel, of the inequalities at the moment on the on the ATP and WTA tours. We've fully seen that in Madrid this week. The tournament director Feliciano Lopez, yes, I think he's had a very tough time of it, and I do genuinely think, just on the topic of tournament directors, I've noticed a trend, and I fully get this, that former players, much heralded players, Grand Slam winners, Amélie Mauresmo at the French Open, get put, into these roles. And I feel like they're there to add a bit of pizzazz and some high profile, credibility and fame to the organisation of a tournament. But I think also you got to remember that, this is a job and there are serious things at stake here. And if things go wrong, I don't know, is a tennis player who hasn't been in event organisation until 6 months ago, for example, is that necessarily the best person for the role? Could you should they be in more kind of ambassadorial role, as a role rather than a role maybe that has more of an impact? Because certainly the Madrid Open this week has been, there has been a few controversies, Cakegate for one of them, but Chris, the 2 others I want to talk about are, well, first of all, is the ladies doubles final ceremony. Well, I say ceremony, not much of a ceremony really happened. We had Jessie Pegula, Coco Gauff, Victoria Azarenka and Beatriz Haddad-Maia played a great match, collected their trophies, and that was it. They were given no platform to speak. And again, similar to Cakegate, this caused a massive storm on Twitter. I mean, where do you stand on this situation? Because this is certainly the first time I've ever heard of a final happening, a ceremony happening, but a ceremony without the chance for the players to thank the crowds, to thank each other and to thank their teams.
It did happen once previously this year, I've been informed. It did happen in the Middle East. I think that was in a tournament in Abu Dhabi. But I think what's very kind of shocking about this is that it's clear from player responses that they weren't given the chance to speak. It definitely was a case that they were made aware that they wouldn't be. This is not normal, as you say. And all of them wanted to thank kind of they want to thank everybody. They wanted the ball kids, the tournament officials, the sponsors, everyone who made the event happen. But it seems like because of a couple of hiccups that they've had, which I'd say that tweet from Feliciano Lopez is more than a hiccup, but because of that, they weren't given the opportunity. And players like Ons Jabeur have expressed their shock as well, saying it's so unfortunate that they weren't given a chance. It's sad and unacceptable. And I think it is sad and unacceptable when Rublev and Kachanov came away with the title and were given the opportunity. So I think there are things where obviously this tournament is able to do things right in terms of prize money. It is equal prize money. But I do think that all of this has been lost on the tournament directors here, in the fact that the cake was symbolic of the difference in pay across the tour. And in Rome, the point is made with the prize money there, where the women take away less than half if you win the title. So I think it's a case where when it comes to the treatment, where you can treat people like for like, you absolutely should. And it just seems like an absolute own goal in that sense to try and kind of shoot yourself in the foot and not give Azarenka the microphone. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, and to me, it's almost like they did the hard bit right. We've seen a lot of tournaments, I think, particularly on the kind of the prize money and the distribution of it in mixed events, it be completely unequal. I think we're going to Rome next week, and we were talking before recording about how unbalanced it is there. But to get something for me that is so accepted and is something the fans want, to not give them that platform is really shocking. And I think, just to build on that, I think what's also shocking is I don't think we've had an official response from the tournament yet. You know, it's happened. You thought they would kind of try and nip it in the bud potentially, but we've still not got an official explanation from it. And I really hope it's not, you know, wasn't premeditated, and I don't know if there were hopefully other factors at play, and you know, maybe there were time constraints. I don't know, but I really hope it wasn't premeditated because you know, these players put a lot of time and effort, you know, on court for this tournament. They should be given the chance to, you know, to make their voices heard in the arena.
Absolutely, and I think you know, that's definitely the case, that there was enough time before the men's final. There was no issue there whatsoever in terms of timing. So it was definitely a decision that was made. And you have to say that it's a very, very unfortunate end to what could have been a good tournament. I think, as we said, it didn't necessarily go off to the best start in terms of the first time. It's been 2 weeks, the longer format. And the final thing, kind of the nail in the coffin, was something that we were all a bit confused by, is obviously the outfits of the ball kids. I think Madrid was the tournament that was famous for the fact they got models.
The models, yeah.
And they couldn't just have models, they had to have other people as well. And then they got more backlash when kind of this took off on TikTok. And for the final, they completely did a 180. Instead of the short mini skirts, they put them in these long sort of culottes and then cut off the arms of the outfit. So it seems that they're like, well, an arm is fine, a leg's not fine. Is this okay? Is this not okay? And it's just a big old mess over in Madrid. So hopefully they can learn from this. We can move on from this and we can start talking about the tennis now.
Times have changed, and I think, you know, there was an acceptance, and it should not have been ever an acceptance, I think, of having models as acting as the ball kids. You know, I remember that firmly being a thing growing up and watching the tournament. But now I think they should just scrap it all together. And I think, you know, you look at the outfits and you do wonder, are they sexualizing a role that it's just not there to be sexualized? I think they really need to go back to basics, and it needs to be just have ball kids like everywhere else. I don't think there's nothing more to it than that, but they've certainly, again, dug themselves into a hole that you know, that there's received backlash, and as a result it seems to be that for the final they had to have a completely different setup.
I mean, it's just so stupid. There's 2 weeks, the tournament, and then on the final day when all the cameras are on, you decide that you're going to do a quick outfit change. It doesn't really make sense. And obviously it was only for the men's matches where they did have the models, and, you know, that ship has long sailed. It was never okay at the time. It's not okay now. And I do think it does make the question. I mean, we've interviewed tournament directors before who are highly professional, highly skilled at the job that they do. And I'm not sure that all players have the experience or the know-how or the savviness or the restraint when it comes to social media to be able to put on a great event and also learn from what's happened. And I think that's something that, I mean, with Maresmo saying that women's tennis is less appealing, I mean, and then with this, I think you have to be very careful, because what happens in these situations is it's never men's tennis that gets discredited, it's always women's tennis. And that's a real problem.
Yes, it's a tricky one, and you know, we've got obviously Laura Robson coming up as tournament organizer in Nottingham on the grass court season. So I do think it's a viable pathway.
Having said that, I think she'll nail it
for former players.
We love Laura
exactly,
Robson.
she'll nail it. But it's interesting to see. But yeah, as you said, certainly it's a slippery slope. If one thing goes wrong, it can snowball very quickly. And unfortunately, I feel like we've seen that off the kind of the tennis court and from the performance side of it in Madrid. But let's do kind of talk about the tennis that did happen. We're going to start with the men. Carlos Alcaraz has defended his Madrid title, faced Jan-Lennard Struff, lucky loser, went out in qualifying to Karatsev. I mean, completely by chance, defeated Karatsev in the main draw in the semi-finals to make the final. But yeah, Alcaraz coming through in 3 sets, 6-4, 3-6, 6-3. Chris, he's backed up his title from a few weeks ago in Barcelona. Does this just kind of cement what we know, that he is now the nailed-on favourite, or he will be going into Roland Garros as the clear favourite for the title?
I mean, if he wasn't already the favourite, He certainly is now, because we've talked about the fact he can play on any court. I mean, this is a court that's caused Rafael Nadal a great deal of problems over the years. It's a court which does not necessarily suit his game, and you'd say that they have relatively similar sort of game styles. Obviously different, there are differences, but I mean, it's one where we've talked about his serve not necessarily always being his strength and how it's becoming much more of a strength. And it just showed you that even when he wasn't having the best service day, when it came to the final, he was still able to get the win. And I think that's so impressive. I think the best players are able to win or find a way to win when they're not playing their best tennis. And he's proven it time and time again that when he is playing his best tennis, he's almost untouchable. And when he isn't, he's still got a very good chance of winning these matches. So I think for me, the only question is when it comes to, best of 5 sets, and if the conditions are particularly heavy, it might be as well, or particularly, maybe actually particularly speedy could be the issue. But to be honest, I think in Paris, I think the conditions will suit him. I think we'll find out more about that in Rome, because that is the most similar clay court event to Roland Garros. But I don't know, Joel, what you're thinking, but I'm not going to be betting against Alcaraz unless Djokovic does something incredible this week in Rome. I
mean, it doesn't feel like any, he's had a few injury niggles this season, but again, that doesn't feel like a chink in the armour at the moment. And I do think, this final and to be honest, this week, I think there have been times when the level that Alcaraz has shown has not necessarily been as high as, say, in Barcelona, like in this final. But the fact that he's able to win ugly when he's not playing his best tennis, I think you need that when you come to a Grand Slam. You're playing across 2 weeks, best of 5 set tennis. You're not necessarily going to be able to bring your full level, at all times. So I think it's scary to see that how well he can play, when he's not necessarily on. I do think he was helped a little bit by Struff. I mean, Struff's had obviously a fantastic couple of weeks in Madrid, particularly I think with his big serve coming to the net, his volleys. He's got a great, he's got a great record in doubles. I've got to be honest though, when I was watching kind of some of this back on TV, Daniela Hantuchova said that the court was being sprayed with water a lot. Like twice, I think she said, maybe before the match started.
Yes.
And to me, it felt like they are just literally doing everything to put this in Alcaraz's favour, because Struff's first serve is a big part of the reason why he was able, I think, to make the final. And although his first serve percent was down, and I think that was one of the reasons that Alcaraz came out with the victory, it certainly felt like, again, and maybe perhaps another misstep by Madrid, is that they wanted Alcaraz to win badly, but perhaps too badly.
I think that might be the case. I mean, if you look at the size of his cake, it would make it seem like maybe they did want him to win really badly, reminding that it is played in Spain. But I mean, anything that Daniela Hantuchova says, I do think is pretty valid. She's got great takes on things, and I mean, she knows her way around a clay court, and it's not common that you would completely drench a clay court. Obviously, it's very warm in Madrid. It's very warm at this time of year. I think it's hitting 30 degrees this week at times. But I mean, the slower the court, the far less effective the biggest weapon for Struff would be. So I do think that is probably something that they might have been doing. But I mean, she said that wherever you play for the home favourites, they will try and do what they can, whether that's crowds cheering. We've seen that this week, or whatever. I think it's a case where there's always going to be some funny things that do play into the home favourites. So they did say, though, when she was being asked about this, if that helped when Henman played at the Queen's Club, and he said it didn't work like that for him. So I think maybe with grass, I mean, I'm not sure what you can do. You can't make it grow any quicker, can you, if you want a slow grass court?
I mean, I did enjoy, I think, Struff, I think tactically played it very well. I think he's a very, he's been around the block a few times. He's a very good player on his day, and you could see what his tactic was. He didn't want to get embroiled in those kind of long rallies with Alcaraz from the back of the court. He wanted to use his big first serve, come in on that, keep the point short. And you could see Alcaraz was trying to get himself in the rally, because I felt like he was standing quite far behind the baseline. I mean, do you feel like that's a tactic that it obviously didn't? It worked for Struff for a set and a bit, I would say. Do you think that's the best tactic to work against Alcaraz, or do you think there are going to be players who could go toe to toe with him from the baseline and come out the victor?
That's a great question. I think the way that he played, I thought was very smart because he actually used the fact this court was slow at times to his advantage by kind of throwing in like a slow kicker. And at times, Carlos was so far back, he was almost kind of right back to the wall. So, and then it gave him time to come in. So I think he was mixing up his serve a little bit in that respect, because obviously it wasn't that quick a surface as it always sort of had been sort of earlier in the week. So I think it is a great plan against him. I do think that, you know, it's sort of the Maxime Cressy approach when it comes to this. I think obviously...
And it takes the drop shot away as well, I feel, from Alcaraz, which is, I feel like he's the best. I actually think he's one of, if not the best drop shotter on the men's tour at the moment. And if someone's coming into the net, like every other point, again, it's going to take one weapon away from his arsenal.
But then I think that was also what was quite interesting, was that he did throw in the drop shot quite regularly. But I think... what was impressive was that obviously Struff is a very, very tall guy and he was still able to get there, but Alcaraz had the answers. I think he does back up the drop very well. But no, I think what is a good plan, and I think what players should do much more of, is these players that return from so far back, it does give you time to throw in, you know, a serve and volley.
Yeah.
And
the underarm serve.
The underarm serve. I mean, it's making a comeback, but you watch players play against Medvedev and you just think, you've got to come in at least once to make him think about what his return's going to be, because it does give yourself the opportunity. But I'm really pleased for Struff in terms of the result he's had, because it was the first time since the ATP Tour was formally brought into existence that someone has played 6 3-set matches in one event.
Wow.
So, I mean, to go through all of that, to have lost in qualifying, and then to come back and push someone, the world number 2, as far as he did in that way, I mean, I just think it's an incredible feat, and we should make sure that, like, we give that enough sort of credence, because it's incredible, really, especially considering he kind of did it out of nowhere.
Yeah, it does not happen very often. He became the 3rd lucky loser to go to the semi-finals, joining Thomas Johansson in 2004 Toronto and Lucas Pouille in Rome in 2016. So yeah, it does not happen very often, but yeah, still came up, unfortunately, against Carlos Alcaraz, who is just looking so formidable. Before we kind of move on, Chris, no one's really talking about it at the moment, but do you feel like Alcaraz could go undefeated on the clay?
He has actually lost on clay this year. Undefeated on the European clay.
Undefeated on the European clay up to the French Open with Rome to come.
Doing eager, let's have a think. I mean, it's hard to bet against him. I think it might be good for him, if I'm honest, to maybe not get one, because I think... you know, that would add that extra level of pressure that could be really difficult when it comes to the French, you know, being the out-and-out favourite, which I think if Djokovic does play well in Rome, if Nadal's in the draw, I think that would also help him, because all the attention wouldn't be on him. Whereas kind of at these tournaments now, he is the superstar at the tournament. So I think to take the pressure off, I think it wouldn't be a bad thing. But I can also see him, you know, I predicted him for this week in Rome, spoiler alert, but... I think he's just so tough to beat these days.
I can see a lot of kind of consistency happening, and I can see that consistency also happen on the women's circuit, because at the moment I feel like we're just getting... Well, we had another Sabalenka versus Swiatek final. This time Sabalenka coming out with the victory. I think that was her first ever victory against Iga Swiatek on clay. 3 sets, very high quality match, very much toing and throwing. It felt like one player broke, then one player broke back, and Sabalenka came through 6-3, 3-6, 6-3. I mean, Chris, this was a fantastic match. This rivalry, I feel, is truly blossoming. What did you feel like Sabalenka did better versus Stuttgart last week, where Swiatek came out as the victor?
I think this week she's just been striking the ball that bit better. When I've been watching her matches, it is breathtaking how hard she's hitting that ball, and it's pinpoint. So I think she just completely overpowered her.
Do you think the conditions helped? Do you think the conditions helped in that sense? I know we spoke about the kind of the altitude of Madrid. Do you feel like that helped Sabalenka as much as it... Did you think it hindered Swiatek a little bit?
I definitely think that Iga prefers a slightly slower court, for sure. I think she's a bit more Rafa-like in that sense, where Madrid wasn't always a happy hunting ground for her either. She obviously hasn't played it very much. She skipped it last year. I think she played some really great tennis to get to the final, but playing on a sunny day versus a late evening is going to be a very different experience. And I think that's something where in the final, the balls were going that bit quicker. Obviously, she won her first Grand Slam title in the cold October of Paris, and she was playing a lot of her matches. I think 2 of them finished after midnight. She made a nod to that in her speech, that the scheduling hadn't been ideal for her. And it's true. So I think she hadn't had that many matches out in the sun. Playing against a player who'd been out in the sun and who hits big, I think condition-wise, it was a bit of a challenge for her. And I mean, that match could have gone either way. I mean, 3-3 in the third. It's just great that we got such a great contest and we got another great 3-set final. I think the Australian Open final was fantastic. And it's great to see that amongst the 3 players of Raducanu, Sabalenka and Swiatek, we're getting highly competitive matches at the end of the tournament.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting from Swiatek's point of view that I do feel like she is able to defeat players in the earlier rounds the most comfortably of those big players. I feel like Sabalenka or Raducanu still got like a set blip in them before they might come through with a victory. But I still feel like the kind of the headlines of Swiatek is like, the bakery is open, up till kind of like the semi-finals or the final. And it just shows, I think, with this final, as much as how easy I feel like she's able to defeat the players in the earlier rounds, it can be only a few points here or there when it comes to the big names at the end of the tournament. Yeah,
I mean, that's tennis. I think it's so...
But she's not as clear a favourite, I feel, as people may like make her out to be.
Yeah, I think this year... it's been a bit different from last year. Obviously, going into the French, she was undefeated. She was on a winning streak. Obviously, that ended on the grass. So I think it is a very different situation. She did have a little bit of time off as well. But she has actually played more tournaments than Sabalenka has this year. So I think it's probably a case that just generally on the tour, these players are all at such a high level that it is always going to be condition-based. It's always going to be how you're able to play on the day. And I think what's so interesting is that, Iga used to be kind of untouchable in these finals. And there's been multiple occasions now where people have got the better of her. And I think maybe her resolve is that little bit lower. And I think the players now have that belief that they can do it because someone else has. Krejcikov obviously kicked that off in Ostrava last year. And then results like when Jessie Pegula had that breakthrough with the United Cup is that you can do it. She is beatable. And I think players now really do think when they go on the court, they've got a chance. Whereas I think during the winning streak, they thought, I've no chance here. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, you talk about the different types of players that Swiatek has come unstuck against. I feel like the ball striking capabilities of a Sabalenka and a Krejcikova, back in Ostrava. Do you feel like that's the way through against Swiatek? Is that the only way through, do you feel, to get a victory over Iga Swiatek at the moment?
I think the serve is key.
The second serve.
Both serves. You've got to serve, well, for her opponents, you've got to serve her off the court and you've got to attack the second serve. And you've got to put her on the defence from the off because she's a fantastic defender. I think she's the best mover on the tour, her and Coco, without question. But I think it's one where if you take the time away from her, then she doesn't have as much time on her shots. And I also think that it does have a mental effect on her in the sense that it's not on her racket. She needs people to miss at that point when they're playing that well. And I think that's what we saw when Raducanu took her out. And I think also we saw from Sabalenka that these are players who are playing their game and not really thinking about necessarily who's on the other side of the net.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see, and I do enjoy. I think what's so great is that Swiatek is such a great learner. She's learning on the court, she's learning off the court. She's always striving, I feel, to better herself, and I like that she's not had it all her own way because I think that up to this moment,
it's exciting, isn't it?
It makes it exciting, and it's better. It's almost. I feel like this result is almost bigger than the tournament because people are like, oh, okay, well, Sabalenka can now beat Swiatek on clay. That puts that doubt in that mind. It creates more of that intrigue when it comes to
all eyes on the French
Open.
Exactly. And I was looking at some things, and it just reminds me of when you see that these big three, and when we had Serena, Maria, the Maria Sharapova that is, and Victoria Azarenka, when we had players who were putting together these performances. I think it's the first time since 2012 that a player has reached at least the quarterfinal at every single tournament in their first 8. And that's so impressive. And I think we're seeing that from all of these players, all of those 3, that they are always in those latter stages. And I think it's quite refreshing because we've had an awful lot of very different results in the last couple of years. And I think it's nice to see rivalries and matches that do get played regularly, because it does mean players are getting better and that they are kind of having these entertaining encounters and playing really great tennis. So I'm here for it, Joel.
Yeah, me too. I do think, generally we've seen on the WTA Tour this season, the added element is consistency. And off that consistency, you can build, these dreams and these realities around the big 3. And yes, Raducanu's here in the mix, and so Sabalenka, who can defeat Swiatek, who's the world number 1. I feel like that consistency has been really, really key to kind of creating these rivalries, and it seems that it's blossoming, particularly on the clay, between Sabalenka and Swiatek, and we'll have to see if it continues in Rome or at the French Open. But it was great to see. We have had some other tournaments happen over the last week or so, and we need to talk, Chris, about Andy Murray, because he has won the Challenger in Provence, defeated Tommy Paul in 3 sets in the final, 2-6, 6-1, 6-2. I was on my live scores app from Lake Como, paying attention to that first set, and I was thinking, there is absolutely no way. There is no way he is coming back from this. But of course, Andy Murray does what Andy Murray does, loves a 3-set challenge. And yeah, he's won his first Challenger title in over 17 years. What do you make of this? Would you say now his clay season is back on track with a Challenger title? Or do we have to take this with a pinch of salt to just kind of remind ourselves, reality check ourselves, that this is the level below the ATP Tour?
I'm very, very pleased for him. Super pleased for him.
Well, does it matter, regardless, given all the things that he has been through?
We all love Andy. I just love Andy Murray doing well, and I think I was at a point on the clay where I'm not sure I could take it, and so I think it's so nice that rather than kind of not get the match practice or not get the time on court that he needs, he's been able to go and play himself into a bit of form, because he was playing pretty well. I think the standard of opponent he played was obviously, we're not talking top tier until the final. And when it comes to Tommy Paul on clay, we're still not talking top tier.
We're talking a player who wanted to stay at home and not play in Monte Carlo.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, he's in the top 20. Yeah. It's a big deal. It's his 3rd top 20 win this year. And he says, we're going to build on this, and we go on. It's very much a case that losing in Madrid was, I think, a bit of a reality check to him.
Blessing in disguise?
I think it's a blessing in disguise that you can't just turn up to these events having not really played on clay for however number of years, I think best part of 6 years, and expect the results to come. And so I think it's been a really sensible decision from him and his team. I think it's a fantastic result, and I really hope in Rome that he's able to, push on. He's got Fognini round 1, a very winnable match. And I think it'd be great to see him, pick up a couple of wins, get a few points, get that ranking up, and
then make his way to another challenger in
Surbiton.
Oh yeah, Surbiton.
We'd love that.
Yeah.
Surbiton, number 1 seed. But hopefully, he's pushing towards a seeded at the Grand Slam, and that will be something that will really help him kind of get further into those second weeks if he can.
Yeah, I mean, that has got to be the goal. And another player who has had a very good week is one of your favourites, Sloane Stephens, has won her first WTA 125 title, defeated Greet Minnen in straight sets. So who knows? Is that another player who's kind of gone about rediscovering her form and it not necessarily been there at times this season?
I mean, you're saying that in a very kind way.
I'm being very polite here. I've been very diplomatic, polite. Knowing your fandom of Sloane Stephens.
Yeah, her results have been non-existent. I think, again, it's a good one where I think drop down, get your confidence back up. She had a bit of a close one where she did lose a set, but again, I think it's a great one that will hopefully put her in good stead for the rest of the clay season. She's a fantastic clay court player. And I think for her to win a title of this size is sometimes a bit more impressive from Sloane, because we do know she likes a big match. She hasn't always been able to put the results together when there aren't kind of, there isn't a Serena Williams on the other side of the net, or someone who is a top player. So it's great to see her moving up to number 36 in the rankings. And no, I think it's a positive building block. That's what I think for all of these results. It's a positive step in the right direction, and hopefully they can all back it up, because losing early in Madrid has given them the opportunity to get some matches under their belt.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the better things, I think, of the 2-week format, is that they've at least made sure that there are alternative tournaments that players can face, even if they weren't necessarily going to be playing in that Masters level event, or if they, succumb to defeat early, at least they've got alternatives, so that they're not just kind of on the practice courts for too long. So yeah, great to see that. Sorana Castella as well, winning the 125k in Catalonia, another great result. And it just shows, I think, Chris, we're going to be getting onto it in the second half, that the Challenger Tour, or the tour below the ATP and WTA proper, it is fully blossoming at the moment, I feel, with Grand Slam champions there. Sorana Castella's a regular mainstay on the WTA tour. It's just great to see them, I think, being put in these environments you wouldn't necessarily expect to see them.
Wow, I mean, it felt a bit more like 250 week for us on the pod, didn't it? We've got the Masters and the 250s going on. What's going on? The level's too high.
Maybe we need to, in the future, think about more just devoting a section to the Challenger circuit. We're gonna have to wait. We'll have to wait and see. But we're going to be talking more about the Challenger circuit in the second half. So we're going to take a quick break now. But do join us when we will be discussing the role challengers play on the ATP Tour, Emma Raducanu's surgery announcement on social media, and also looking ahead to the Italian Open in Rome, which will include our famous predictions. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, sponsored by downloadtennis.com. And now we're going to move on to par for the courts, Chris. I've got a par for the courts for you. It's a highest
Fantastic.
Number.
It's been a while, Joel.
Highest number wins, because no Kim here. You're going to be by yourself.
Highest number wins. Who am I competing against?
Oh, sorry. You're competing against the number I'm going to set you. So you're sort of competing against me, the taskmaster.
Right, okay. So let's see what we can do.
Right, so your topic is, and for our listeners as well, you probably maybe could have guessed it. The Italian Open is coming up, and I would like you to name any of the ladies singles champions from the year 2000 to 2022. I have counted the number, and there are 14. There are 14 players in total. And I'm going to set par for the courts at 10 then. I'm going to set it at 10.
Okay. From 2000, here we go. We'll start with Iga Swiatek, who's won it for the last 2 years.
Correct answer, yes.
I believe the year before that, Simona Halep won it in 2000.
Correct, yes. 2020, yes.
2020, of course, sorry. God, that would have been...
Yeah, it's not been around that long, yeah.
Yeah, Iga's won it for 20 years. I think Karolina Pliskova won it in 2019.
Very good. I mean, very quickly, can you remember who she beat in that final?
I don't know. Who was it?
It was Johanna Konta.
Oh, it was her clay era. Yes.
Yes. Yep. So, Pliskova, that is a correct answer, 2019.
And then I'm not sure, but I'm not going to do it in order because I'm running out. But
so
I know that Svitolina has won it multiple times.
That is correct. Yes, 2017 and 2018. So that's 4 correct answers.
That is chronological. I know Serena's won it.
Correct answer. Yes, Serena Williams. How many times do you think Serena has won it?
Oh, I'd say 3?
4 times. Serena Williams won it 4. The last of those being in 2016. So yes, that is a correct answer.
Sharapova has won it multiple times.
Correct. She's a 3-time winner. The last one back in 2015.
Safina has won Rome. And famously, she won Rome and Madrid, from that quote from Serena. That's how I remember.
Dinara Safina is a correct answer. She actually lost the final, but she also won one as well in 2009. So, yep.
Martina Hingis has won it.
Correct. Yes, she actually beat Dinara Safina in 2006.
That did help me, Joel. That clear. I remember that one. That was not a great match, that one.
That's 8. Yep.
Jankovic has definitely won.
Jelena Jankovic, correct answer. Yes, twice a champion. So that is not. I mean, we're already here. That is 9. So one
par
more.
10.
One more for par for the courts.
Well, I think Kim Clijsters has won it.
Kim Clijsters? Correct answer. Yes. Very good. 2003.
And I think I can get one more.
That brings you up to 10. Yeah. Any more?
I set myself for 11. I've seen this week on Twitter. So this is cheating slightly. I have seen on Twitter this week that this was the biggest title that Jelena Dokic won.
Very good. Yes, Jelena Dokic back in 2001 was the correct answer. As a couple more, a very rogue one in 2010, which I'm going to get onto in a sec. But you could have had Monica Seles in the year 2000.
Did Enan ever win it? No, I don't think she did.
No, so Justine Henin was an incorrect answer. Venus Williams did win it, but that was back in 1999. So yeah, Monica Seles, Jelena Dokic, Serena Williams, Kim Clijsters, Amelie Mauresmo.
Goodness.
Yep, twice a champion. Martina Hingis, Jelena Jankovic, Dinara Safina.
Did Patti Schnyder ever win it?
Nope. She lost in the final in 2005. Serena Williams, Sharapova, Svitolina Pliskova, Simona Halep, Iga Swiatek. And the final answer, 2010 champion, defeated Jelena Jankovic in the final. I mean, this is a very tough one. It'd be impressive. Any of our listeners got this. Spanish player?
It's not Carla, is it?
No, it is Maria Jose Martinez Sanchez.
God, that is a blast from the past.
That is an absolute blast from the past. So
she originated the mullet, didn't she? Barry Manilow type haircut. But
yes, you did correctly get 10 answers and beyond. So you have completed successfully par for the courts this week. So well done.
Thank goodness. I tell you what, if I'd have gone Justine Henin earlier, I know.
I was sort of waiting / hoping for that, but it did not. It sadly did not.
It just wasn't in the memory bank. I've watched a lot of tennis in Rome.
Yes. Well, yeah. Listeners, let us know how you did. Did you do as well as Kiss? Did you get 100%? Let us know. We're going to be moving on to the Tennis Weekly mailbag now, and we had William on Twitter get in touch with us. Hi, Tennis Weekly. Why are so many of the top players dropping down and playing on the ITF/Challenger circuit? I don't remember a time when these events had such big names, strong draws, and large crowds. What is causing this, and is it good or bad for tennis? Great question. I think Challengers, they're flavour of the month at the moment. And yeah, Chris, what's your 2 cents on the role of Challengers at the moment, given what we're seeing with more high-profile players that we would expect perhaps in the top tier of tennis playing down in this second tier?
I mean, that is a great question. I mean, it's undeniable that it's happening. I think we've never seen these sorts of draws, and it's regularly kind of a comment that we say. I mean, this is the best Challenger draw we've ever seen. I mean, Murray versus Monfils in the first round.
It's ridiculous.
It is a bit ridiculous. Then we had, on the flip side of that, I think we had like a Svitolina versus
Stevens semi-final.
Roos. We had a semi-final as well this week on the 125. So, I mean, it is undeniable that it's happening. I think it's a case where the scheduling from the ATP and WTA is actually kind of allowing a bit more of this. So I think, for example, with the women's side, there isn't kind of the 250s or the tournaments that players can play, so players are dropping down. And on the men's side, I think it's a case that these second week tournaments where people have dropped out, it is giving them the opportunity to play in a challenger. Yeah. So I think that's, for example, why kind of Tommy Paul would. That's the example why there was that great challenger in Phoenix that happened, because it was the players who got knocked out in that first week of Indian Wells before heading to Miami. So I think that's what's happening and what's causing it. I think it shows that there's a lot of interest in tennis because, I mean, in Provence, it was quite stunning, the court they had and the crowd, and it did not feel at all like a challenger. But in terms of like whether it's a good or a bad thing or why people are doing it, I think they're doing it because they haven't got the form. But I think the reason why it's kind of not always a good thing is because it is actually causing players to then have to drop down a level below who would normally play it. So it's taking some of those money-making and points opportunities away from some of the lower-ranked players. So I think it's great in some ways for tournaments if they want to build their stature. It's great for players who haven't got form but are quite highly ranked and able to drop down. But the problem is that it's not great for your average tennis player. And I think that is something which is a real problem, is that these aren't supposed to be the spectacles that they are. These are supposed to be the places where people who are ranked kind of, you know, outside the top 50 are able to kind of play tournaments week in, week out, and get their ranking up. And I think it's not necessarily designed for the top players to top up their ranking. So that's where I'd say, Joel, I have a bit of an issue with kind of, I think Murray maybe jumped 10 points in the rankings from 52 to 42. And that feels a bit mad from a challenger. So I think that is a little bit of a problem there when it comes to who's able to play them.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was thinking about this earlier, and to me, you know, growing up, my view on challengers was this is where you go to kind of prove yourself before you make the jump to the tour, and it was all about playing up, and it feels increasingly like we're getting players play down. And as you said, it feels like that is taking away the opportunities from, you know, those players who are on the, you know, the challenger circuit, you know, need to get in these draws. I don't feel like we've necessarily seen at the moment, you know, challenger level players kind of be frustrated about kind of how stacked some of these draws are and whether that's kind of taking away, you know, their spots. But I certainly feel like the kind of the view of it is that actually it plays both ways. It can play for the top tier and it can play for the, you know, the players below. And maybe it shouldn't necessarily be the spectacle that it is at the moment. But I feel like that's going to be a hard case to answer for, you know, tournament organisers of these events. The ATP, for example, they want to put on the greatest events possible, and they're always going to try and hanker for players, the top players who are going to be trying to rediscover their form, coming back from surgery, whatever it may be. But I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. And maybe we just need more challenger events if this is happening and players are coming to these events from both sides. Maybe we need more events to cater at this level.
Yeah, I think the challenger side on the ATP, they do a great job. There's always more than one going on of varying different levels. And then you also have the ITF events that kind of supplement that. I think obviously what we heard reported that it was possible that kind of top 30 players would be banned from 250s on the WTA tour. You know, they're obviously trying to stamp this out and trying to get players to play in the bigger tournaments rather than kind of have them be places to kind of pick up some ranking points and boost your ranking. But I guess the question that I have with it is, if you are able to pick up quite a few points from like a 1-2-5, for example, in the WTA, then as I say, and as you joked about last week, the Maya Sharif effect, where you're able to get your ranking quite high without actually playing big matches. So it feels like you need people to be able to play up, but you don't necessarily need people to be able to play down, is what I think.
It should feel like a transition tour. It shouldn't feel like you can be self-sufficient or like on this type of tour. Tennis is a very cutthroat business, and you either make it or you don't. And I think, you know, the challenger circuit, the ITF circuit, is very much a proving ground for that. And I think, you know, that conversation has been around for a lot longer than I think, you know, we're talking about at the moment with these kind of top players playing down. But certainly it feels like it's losing that kind of transitionary essence that I feel like we've come and known to kind of signify as over the last decade plus.
Yeah, it feels like it's less supporting the lower ranked players. It's more allowing a top up for some of the higher ranked players. But again, I mean, it's been very entertaining this week, and the story of Murray dropping down.
It's still great to
having
see.
a great week. It is great to see.
That's what's so
and
hard about it, I think, because it is such a great to see these players in these environments.
And the passion. They're happy to drop down to do that for the sport and for them to get a great result. And I think that's, I mean, no one's more passionate than Andy Murray. So wherever he wants to play, let him play,
exactly.
is what I say.
And where obviously there are Ryanair flights for Judy Murray
Judy needs to be able to get there, of course.
Yes. But yeah, great question. Listeners, make sure if you've got any questions for us at Tennis Weekly HQ, make sure to get them in. But for now, we're going to be moving on to talk about Emma Raducanu. Emma Raducanu, Chris, she's just had surgery had surgery in the last week or so. She had it on both of her hands, a recurring injury on a bone. She's been trying to manage the pain and play through it kind of for most of the year. It's obviously not been working. We saw her pull out of Madrid. And, you know, she wrote a nice kind of heartwarming message to her fans, but she ultimately said, "It pains me that I will miss the summer events, and I tried to downplay the issues, so I thank all my fans who continued to support me when you did, not knowing the facts. Look forward to seeing you all back out there." What do you make of this latest development in this saga? You know, we spoke last week, and we were sort of almost, I feel, foreshadowing. So you certainly were sort of foreshadowing this being a potential outcome. How do you feel now that you've seen it, and now we probably know that we're not going to be seeing Raducanu definitely at the French Open and most likely at Wimbledon?
Well, firstly, I think it's super important to say that, I mean, for someone at her stage of her career to have kind of 3 surgeries is obviously very worrying, and we wish her all the best. We hope that she is able to kind of recover really well, and we really hope that we can see her on the court whenever she's ready and whenever she's recovered. But I mean, what I do think is a positive from this is that it was very clear at the point we were speaking about it last week that it wasn't something that could be managed. And my big question when it comes to this is why did it take as long as it did for her team to kind of come to this decision? And it's meant obviously missing Wimbledon, whereas if something had been looked at slightly earlier, the scheduling would have been different. But I do also think taking time out is not necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, this is not a break because she needs to have surgery. And it's obviously surgery on both hands and her ankle that she injured in Auckland. So there will be a lot of recovery that has to be done. And I think talking about when she'll be back is a little bit kind of a bit too soon because, I mean, she hasn't had a third operation yet, as far as we know. She's had 2 of them. So I think it's a shame from the perspective that this has had to happen to someone so young who's actually obviously got kind of some problems that can't be fixed through rehab. But it is at the same time, it sounds like it's the right decision, and it will be for the best of her career, and she'll have a long one, I'm sure. And this is obviously very early in her career, and it's better to do it now than it is to do it later, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, she's obviously got so much time and so much, you know, potential, and I'm just hoping that she can come back and play the tennis, you know, that she wants to play. I feel like as a British fan, we've just been, I don't want to say very unlucky because it just feels like it keeps happening over and over. But, you know, Laura Robson obviously had to have surgery. It felt like it really cut years off her career, unfortunately, and curtailed it. Carl Edmonds had knee injury issues. Andy Murray as well. I do think there has to be something to be said around how these players are managed at a young age, and whether it might be that it's something that is specific to Emma Raducanu, but I feel like these young players need to be managed in the right way, and otherwise we get into these situations that I just don't think a player should be having surgery, 2 surgeries, 3 surgeries at 20 years old. They need to be managed better. They need to be managed better growing up, it feels like. And I'm obviously not an expert in that, but that would be the thing I would take from this, is that these players, yes, they've got all the talent in the world, but they need to be conditioned properly. And I look at, if I'm being really honest, big fan of obviously British tennis, but you look at the track record, it's not the most glowing, is it?
It isn't. And I think that's such a great point, because it is about being conditioned and managed, but it's also genuinely about your management. And where was the pressure, you know, when obviously if she's not been in a position where she could play, of being in some of these tournaments and playing injured, you know, it's always very worrying when a player plays injured, and it's very different if there's a bit of a niggle, they have some medical tape. But this is something quite fundamental when it comes to her hands. And it does beg the question as to where was that pressure coming from? And was it from agents? Was it from somewhere else? Was it from sponsorship? Was it Emma who really wanted to play? But then maybe someone had to say, well, actually, this probably isn't going to be for the best of you, for the best for you. And so that. We have questions, Joel, don't we? But what we do think is that it does seem like it was beyond the point of a normal injury situation. So
there needs to be some sort of intervention. And she did it live from the hospital bed, which was honestly hilarious. She was having pom bears, which I think a lot of our British listeners will relate to. They're actually crisps that are shaped like bears. And she was having a joke with her fans on live. So I think it's good that she's in great spirits. And take as much time as you need, Emma. But the tennis does move on. We are going to Rome for the Italian Open. We're running out of time, Chris, but we're going to quickly look at the women's and men's draws and make some predictions. First of all, the women's draw. Question for you. Are we going to get an Iga Swiatek versus Aryna Sabalenka trilogy final is what I'm calling it for now?
Why would you bet against it, Joel? I haven't. I'm not sure I could bring myself to after seeing the way they played this last week. But I tell you what, if there's ever a draw to test Iga, it might be this one because she's got a French Open finalist in Sara Errani as a potential second round opponent.
Very, very true.
As well as another French Open finalist, Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova. And then Svitolina's in the mix there, as well as Bernarda Pera, who obviously put it together on some of the clay last year. And then she's got Kontaveit, Samsonova. She's got Fernandez. So I think this is I'm excited
it's
by
very
this draw.
Testing. What is it also? I swear, Swiatek and Raducanu they always end up, I swear, in the same
quarter or fourth round.
What is going on? There's a conspiracy theory there.
I think it's the Wimbledon points not counting, Joel.
Yes,
I think that's why, because she's a 6 through 8.
I will say though, very quickly, I did enjoy Alicia Parks is playing Annette Kontaveit. It's the battle of the indoor court surface champions
specialists. Do they not know?
That's it. Yeah.
Do they not know that there is not a roof in Rome?
What is going on? What is going on?
Well,
exactly.
Maybe they can put some sort of a temporary structure in place for that. But it's a great draw. I really think there'll be some fun ones.
Yeah, I do think. Yeah, that top half certainly is very tricky. Very, very tricky. Yeah, Sabalenka, of course, the second seed in the bottom half. I'm looking at that third quarter as quite open with Coco Gauff in there. Yes, Jessie Pegula is probably going to make a go of it. Got Karolina Pliskova. Kudermetova, who's also had a good run in Madrid.
Is Garcia going to do something here, Joel?
Oh, that's a tough one. Possibly. Petra Martic.
It's always possibly.
Petra Martic, though, had a very good run in Madrid. So
that's a tough draw for Garcia.
That would be quite tough. And also, interestingly, you got Sophia Kenin as well in the first round, could face Sabalenka in round 2. Sloane Stephens, Podoroska. Yeah, it's all going on. Where are you lying with your predictions then? Semi-finals and final.
I've gone for, unsurprisingly, Iga Swiatek. And then I've gone for the seeding, Joel. I've gone for...
Yeah, I saw this.
I've gone for Ons.
Are you not aware of the injuries she's been... Her calf injury that I feel like she's been suffering from recently.
I am aware of it, but I just think Rome, she plays some great tennis.
Also, Badosa, second round. I was like, I can see Badosa taking out your ball there.
You also saw Badosa get into the final of Madrid, so I think we'll take that one with a pinch of salt, Joel. And then in my other semi-final, I've got the Rome specialists. I've got Pliskova making it through to semi-finals there. And then I've got Sabalenka. And then I've got the same final as last week, and I've got a different result. I think that the clay of Rome, I think, will be 3 in a row for Iga. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going Swiatek, Krejcikova, Pegula, Sabalenka. It was very much a toss-up. I was thinking Pliskova, but I've changed my mind at the last second. But as the same with you, I'm fully expecting another Swiatek, Sabalenka. I just think they're streets ahead, to be perfectly honest, with everyone else. And yes, Swiatek's draw does look harder on paper, but I think she's going to overcome it, get to the final, and I think she's going to defeat Sabalenka. I think the conditions play to her strengths a lot better here than in Madrid. So I'm going.
So is this a mini French Open then?
It
if
could
you've gone
well
ego
be.
as well?
It could well be. So yeah, I'm hoping that happens. I mean, moving on to the men's draw. Novak Djokovic is in the draw. Yannick Sinner is also back. There is no Rafael Nadal, but yeah, where do you stand on this? The fact that we've got now Novak Djokovic back in the game, back in the draw in Rome. What does that mean for Carlos Alcaraz and his chances?
Well, I think it's very hard to make a prediction based on the last time we saw Novak Djokovic was not the Novak Djokovic that we necessarily are familiar with at all. And so I think he's such an unknown quantity at the moment that I haven't gone for him.
Okay.
I've gone for Holger from that section. And I thought Kachanov's been showing some great form. So that's one semi-final, with the other one being Rublev rediscovering his Monte Carlo form, and Alcaraz. And I've gone for a Rune Alcaraz final. And I just think, based on kind of the tight matches that Holger has been getting into and not always winning, I think it might be a really tight third going to Alcaraz. But that is going way beyond the realms of what I've been asked from a prediction. What have you gone for?
There is some connections here, and I'm not also convinced on Novak Djokovic. I've got Holger Rune, Yannick Sinner in my top half. Think Sinner's going to come back. He's going to do what he does in front of the Italian crowd, and they're going to love it. And then I've got Taylor Fritz.
Of course
Fritz,
you have.
Carlos
When do
Alcaraz.
you not, Joel? When do you not have Taylor Fritz in the mix?
I think, yeah, I don't know if Alcaraz is going to have it all his own way. And, this is a third tournament in a row after Barcelona and Madrid. I don't know if it's going to catch up with him. Having said that, I've gone, Fritz Alcaraz, and my final is Rune Alcaraz, but Rune winning. I do think it's going to catch up to Alcaraz at some point. I'm hoping the final. And
I'd love that.
Yeah. I think that would be a great final. The Italian crowd are going to absolutely love Holger Rune if he keeps up his... I feel like his crowd antics throughout the
it's going to be
2
lively.
weeks.
When I was there last year, it was very lively. It's almost like a big party. So as long as Holger's ready to bring the same temperament he's had on the clay court so far this season, I think it will be very interesting if we have that.
Well, I would expect nothing less, and we're going to stay tuned and see how Rome develops. But listeners, I hope you have enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action to come from the ATP and WTA tours. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Tennis Weekly Pod. You can email the show, tennisweeklypod@gmail.com, or check out our website at tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back next week at Tennis Weekly HQ for another tour catch-up, looking back on all the action so far from the Italian Open in Rome. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.